The man with the golden voice. Thanks for joining the show.
Hardly.
Yeah, happy.
I got a face for radio, so.
Ben Portnoy of the state. Of course, you cover South Carolina and everything going trending with that program. I cannot thank you enough for joining us here live on Radio Row. What's it like covering the Gamecocks right now with, my God, Ben? I mean, I tout up South Carolina. These fans, they get mad. Like I put Spencer Rattler, 6th best quarterback in the SEC. They said, why the disrespect? I didn't think I was being disrespectful. What's it like covering this team on the rise right now?
Yeah, it's definitely been crazy. I mean, I think you look at it, there's just a lot of excitement around the program, for better or worse. Some of it, I think, it can get a little crazy. I mean, I think you got folks talking about winning an SEC East title, and I think it's easy to get kind of riled up on that side of things. But, you know, I mean, there's reason to be excited, right? You look at where this program was about a year and a half ago, really, when Shane Beamer took over. You're coming off a 2-win season. It was a 4-win season before that. Mm-hmm. Things had kind of tanked a little bit. You had a lot of guys transferring out. I mean, at one point, South Carolina had 2 scholarship quarterbacks on its roster in, I guess, January, February after Shane Beamer had taken over, and, you know, had the carousel of quarterbacks last year and still won 7 games. So, I mean, the fact that you go out, you beat Auburn, you beat Florida, you catch those teams at the right time, sure, so you peel the layers back a little bit there, but at the same time, like, you're winning games that you weren't really necessarily expected to. You go and blow the doors off North Carolina in the bowl game, and all of a sudden people are really excited. And like you mentioned, Spencer Rattler being added to the equation, some of the other guys that they've brought in through the transfer portal I think are going to be really big impact guys quickly. So you add all those things together, and, I mean, there's reason. It makes sense why people are excited and, you know, why a lot of people think that, you know, South Carolina's kind of the fun pick this year, right, to be, you know, to push in the SEC East a little bit.
Speaking of fun, I saw your tweet just earlier. You know, could you imagine Nick Saban coming out with Viper sunglasses, grabbing the mic?
I literally said to someone down there as soon as I was coming up here, like, can you guys imagine, like, Kirby Smart going through this whole deal? Like, I mean, look, like, there's enough craziness with college football coaches and everything like that, and guys handle their business differently, and I get that. But Shane Beamer is one of those guys that I think that when you talk to people around the program, around college football, guys just love playing for him, and I think it makes a lot – like, there's a reason why they're bringing in guys they are, right? Guys love playing for the guy. The same thing could be said about his dad at Virginia Tech for years, right? Frank Beamer was always one of the ultimate kind of good guys in college football, and I think Shane's got a lot of that going for him too, and I think that, you know, he's just one of those guys that he gets kids this age. He connects well with parents, families, kids, whatever. Like, you know, we always joke at booster events and stuff that, you know, if Shane was sitting in the crowd, you couldn't pick him out of the crowd. I mean, he's just kind of like your average guy, and in the best way possible, right? I mean, he's just an easy guy to get along with, like a guy that I think players love being around, staff loves being around, and I think that, you know, when you see videos of him dancing in Pit Viper sunglasses and, you know, rapping in the defensive team meeting room, it's a different animal, and I think, but it's things like that add to sort of the excitement and sort of the fervor for it, and why people get so riled up and excited.
It kind of feels like the changing of the guards. You know, this next generation really embracing the social media. You know, I've seen them on TikTok. I'm seeing them doing these dances and just having fun. What was Lane Kiffin with the Bentley, and you know, it's just you don't see that with these older guys that maybe don't have to. But this next crop, it's going to be, where's the fun place to play and who's paying me with the NIL?
Yeah, it is. And I think that's the thing that's so interesting is that, you know, South Carolina, obviously, like, the history's not there, right? So you got to be doing something a little bit different, whether that's, you know, how you're recruiting, how you're pitching, whatever that is, right? And I think that when you've got a guy like Shane Beamer who first of all, is as involved in the recruiting process as any head coach that I've been around, and then you throw in sort of the fun factor, right? And now, like, I think the thing that people misconstrue is, like, people think Shane Beamer's not a competitive guy. That's one of the most competitive dudes I've ever been around or seen. But being able to have that fun side of it, like, I don't think there's a lot of, you know, there's not a lot of fluff with Shane Beamer. Like, he is about as real as you're going to get from a college football coach. And I think people that means a lot to recruits, to players, to coaches. Absolutely. I mean, even the guys that you're seeing that South Carolina's either in on that maybe they don't get. Like, you look at a guy like Chandavian Bradley who just committed to Tennessee, but, you know, South Carolina was right in the middle of that really late in the process.
Right.
And wasn't really in it for most of the process until they got him on campus and things like that, and connected really well with the staff, and still talked about how much he loved that staff. So I think that, you know, when you're hearing those, you're hearing the same things over and over again. And I think that it's one thing to hear it once, but when you hear it over and over again, there's a pattern to it. And I think that that's what you're saying.
And to touch on that, the portal, you know, I mean, who knows? The kid may not work out at Tennessee, and there he is. Okay, I should have stayed with South Carolina. So
that's my favorite thing about the portal, though.
I just want to ask one more question. I know Mike's not used to me asking questions, but I'm buying into the South Carolina hype here. But the number one question that I know you're probably getting all the time is, where the hell is Rattler? Where is he?
It's interesting. I think there's two schools of thought, because what people really are excited about is hearing reporters complain, right? But
Right.
I think that I think that the thought is, right, if you bring Spencer, does it turn into, okay, like, we just want to ask him about Oklahoma and what the hell happened there?
Yeah.
Or is the other side of it, okay, well, if you don't bring him, then you end up bringing three guys who are all going to ask about Spencer Rattler. So it's sort of like there's no winning here. I get it. It's a little bit of a bummer. I was definitely a little bit bummed out, but.
Yeah.
I get it, but it would have been nice, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think that I'm not the only one in the room who would say that would have added some fun to the equation.
Well, South Carolina, we've got a loaded table out here asking Bryce a million questions. That could have been South Carolina capitalizing on social media. It just didn't make sense to me why he wouldn't be here.
And to me, that was something that was interesting, too, because I think, say what you will about Shane Beamer, but one of the things that they've done really, really well better than any, as well as any coach in America, is they've capitalized on sort of the good publicity, I guess you want to call it, and that's the kind of thing where if you can get microphones in front of folks and build some excitement and things like that, like usually South Carolina's been really on top of that, so it's not necessarily a missed opportunity or a blunder or anything like that. That's probably going a little too deep on it, but it's sort of like, okay, that would have been interesting to have Rattler here.
Now, I was going to ask you about the transfer portal, of course. Last time we had you on, you talked about that. You hit on all the guys South Carolina has added. But that is just like a variable that we just don't know how it works out because it's so new. But it looks like South Carolina's added a hell of a lot especially on offense, productive guys ready to go in there. So what is the ceiling for this offense with Spencer Rattler? And I know South Carolina fans not high on Marcus Satterfield, but now that he's got all these weapons, I think overnight he's going to become a better coach. You know what?
Yeah, it's amazing how, coaches look a lot better when they've got some good players around them. It's as simple as that, right? If only it was that simple, right? But I think that, when you look at what South Carolina's got right now, and especially through the transfer portal, you look at a guy like Corey Rucker from Arkansas State, a guy like Juice Wells from James Madison. I mean, I think both of those guys are legit, like, SEC receivers. I think Juice Wells is a guy that if you look up at the end of the season and he's, a second-team All-SEC guy, that's the kind of good that these guys can be, and I think that makes a big difference. I think it's you've got guys in skill positions that can really stretch the defense in a way that South Carolina couldn't last year. And then you throw in guys that you bring back, right? Jaheim Bell's a guy that can play just about anywhere on the field, short of quarterback, basically, and I think you're going to see him all over the place and could be a first-round pick next year. Austin Stogner, who comes in from Oklahoma with Spencer Rattler, that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. I mean, he's a guy that a lot of people have on NFL radars if he stays healthy. I know that's an if, but you've got a lot of pieces there. And then Josh Vann, who's their leading receiver last year and had a really, really big breakout year last year. I mean, you've got all those pieces again. I was joking with someone on the staff, recently as they were saying, last year it was sort of figuring out who to put on the field. Now I got to figure out how to get everyone on the field, and it's a totally different animal. And I mean, it's a good problem to have, but you got a lot of pieces there to feel really good about what they can do offensively. Now the offensive line was a problem, and there's something to be said for continuity on the offensive line, right? Same guys playing with the same guys, but for South Carolina, it's sort of like, okay, you're bringing back the whole offensive line, but the problem is you're also bringing back the whole offensive line because they rank, just about at the bottom of the SEC and just about everything blocking wise. So it's not all on the offensive line, but I think that, to be fair, that group can't be much worse than it was. So it's a pretty low bar to clear, right, on paper, that group doesn't have to be that much better for this team to take a big step forward because I think they did upgrade so much at skill position that the offensive line just has to give it enough time to develop. And I think running back, they're going to be good again. You lost your two top rushers in Kevin Harris and Quandre White, but you've still got Marshawn Lloyd, who's basically a fringe 4-star, 5-star recruit.
Absolutely.
In the 2019 class. Christian Beal-Smith comes over from Wake Forest, and folks who aren't familiar with him, he was in the same. He's a guy that led Wake Forest in rushing the last 2 years. So you've got pieces there, and I think that's why people are so optimistic. I think the defense is going to be good again. I think maybe they won't lead the SEC in takeaways again, but they're going to be good again. And even if they take a slight step back, I think that group's going to be good enough to keep you in some games. So.
Are you a little worried about that optimism? Because here Jordan just on national TV said he's got him second in the East. So I'm just that's a high bar.
Schedule's tricky too. Georgia State, you can't overlook them. We're Tennessee people. We know that.
Yeah,
should have been
LSU.
Auburn last year. Then at
Auburn,
Arkansas,
yeah.
Georgia, right out the gate.
Yeah, you're staring 1-2. Not necessarily 0-3. You don't necessarily think that you're going to lose the game to Georgia State, but you're staring 1-2 in the face with that trip to Arkansas week 2. That's the biggest game of the season to me. And I know it's super early, and I know you're, in a weird way, it's probably better you're playing that Arkansas team early than late. I mean, they got a lot of pieces to fill and figure out in a little bit. I mean, I know Bumper Pool's back for what is 117th year of eligibility, but I think KJ Jefferson's as good a quarterback as there is in this league, and he's a tough matchup to deal with, and That's a different animal, and South Carolina was not great against the run last year, and that's something you worry about a little bit with Arkansas and what KJ Jefferson can bring on that side of the ball too. So I think that's the game that I circle and say, hey, okay, if this team wins 6 or 7, to me, a successful season to South Carolina looks like you get to 6-7 wins in a bowl game, but you look better in the games that you lose. That's success, even though if the win-loss column doesn't necessarily match that, folks will say, oh, well, they won 7 games last year, they won 7 games this year. It's not exactly linear, but there's more to it than that. Don't get run off the field by Tennessee. Don't lose 30-0 to Clemson and be not competitive at all.
Right.
Be competitive in the games you lose, and I think keep that win mark somewhere around 6-7. Now, if you win an Arkansas game, then you're looking at, okay, can they get to 8? Can they get to 9? They go to Kentucky, which, at this rate, you have to consider that a loss more often than not with what Mark Stoops has got going. So it's tricky. I think that because the SEC East is so sort of, I don't know if loaded's the right word, but you've got so many teams there right in the middle of the pack that are all kind of sort of trying to punch up a little bit. And I think that's, whether you want us to call it Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, all those programs are kind of in the same spot, and you can all kind of talk yourself into, they could win 8-9 games, right? Why not? Only 1 or 2 of those teams is going to win 8 or 9 games. That's just I'm not a math expert, but that's generally how it works, right? So I think that if that's the case, you've got to be able to. You've got to be able to capitalize on some of these games. Arkansas is the one, I think.
And their fan base will be pissed if you don't pick them.
Trust me,
Kentucky.
Listen, I'm still catching hell for picking South Carolina to win 4 games last year, so I may not hear the end of that for the rest of my life, but it's all right. So it's part of it, right?
Hey, well, you can make that up right now. Final question for me. Spencer Rattler, end of the season, when he's in the Heisman finalist, what place is he finishing?
Ooh, I'm going to say 4th.
Okay.
I think he's got a shot. I think he's going to put up numbers, and I think I'm interested to see him in this offense because it is different than what they ran at Oklahoma. It's a little more pro style. It's less. It's less no huddle.
I would maybe even argue South Carolina right now has better weapons than Oklahoma after all the players left.
It's true, and I think that's something that people don't realize or maybe overlook, whatever you want to call it. The South Carolina team's got pieces offensively, and I think that it's easy to look at it, and I think that, I even fall into it where I'm like, it's South Carolina. Are they really going to win 8-9 games?
Right.
It's hard to, actually make that projection, right? It's easy to say, hey, Florida's probably going to figure it out and win 9 games. Those things are easy to do because Florida's done it for 30 years since Spurrier, right? And I know things have been sort of a mess, but it's harder to pick that with South Carolina. It's harder to go buck tradition a little bit. And I think that, Shane Beamer deserves a lot of credit for last year, but then, South Carolina's in a spot where they really can capitalize, and Spencer Rattler is going to be a big piece of that. I mean, if he looks the part of what he was in 2020 at Oklahoma, that's the kind of guy that can go out and win you a ball game or two on his arm. I mean, he can show up and throw 350 yards and 4 touchdowns and go beat Arkansas. That's the kind of thing that South Carolina didn't have last year that they've got this year, and I think makes it so hard to peg them because that is such an unknown.
Yeah.
Hey, before you take off, Ben, can you tell the audience how to find your work and what you got going on down here at Media Days?
Yeah, definitely. You can find me on thestate.com or at bportnoy15 on Twitter, and we'll have coverage all week, so I'll be here through Thursday, so the rest of the week, and lots going on with South Carolina here today with Shane Beamer and that crew coming through, so it should be fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you guys having me.